Right, so we've got some beautiful, inspired by moorlands in the winter, or moorlands full stop. We've got some beautiful partridges or some lovely pheasant, sorry, grouse. We haven't got pheasants, we've got grouse and partridges today. So these are some of the other lovely choices. Really, I just love those kind of moorland textures. Really nice, aren't they? Lovely. I've gone for this one just because I quite fancied. I just liked the bird being a little bit more in focus and to the front, but you can have a go at any. So I'm going to have a go at this in watercolours today. I might even bring in a little bit of uh, watercolour pencil because mine is really small. We can do that anyway. Let's find my let's see the watercolour pencils. Should we see here? Hmm. But you don't have, you can just use one or the other, you don't have to use any. And if you are attempting this in acrylics or pastels, then you can just layer up with those light colours on top, just move mine to the side. So I'm just going to have a go at, I am going to just pop, I'm just going to just split this up. I mean, if you feel quite comfortable just mapping that out and not worry, then absolutely by all means go for it. But for anybody who's kind of just getting started with and wants to feel a bit more confident with the drawing, with the proportions, then you can just divide your page up. Let's bring a pen for that because I can't see that on the screen. There we go. In the middle. Just helps with, seeing how much of the head you've got and everything like that. So if you want to transfer that by drawing onto your paper, you can. With anything, with certainly because it's such a light pastel drawing, you might want to make your drawing underneath it very light too. I'm just going to put a light kind of little grid on here. You can probably just see that. Now I will have to do it much more darkly, so you'll be able to see what I'm doing. But obviously, the lighter the pastels that you use, the more transparent they are. So, translucent. So, some of these darker lines will come through. So, obviously, apart from if obviously the demonstration, I will just go nice and lightly with that, and then you can just kind of rub out your lines. So the other thing with the watercolor is, of course, that we can go as loosely or as detailed as you want, and then there's everything in between. So again, this is about finding a style you're enjoying. If you love to go loose, go loose. If you love to go detailed, then go detailed. Just, kind of go in with a bit of your joy, really, is what I'd say with this. And if you're wanting to just explore going a bit looser, then by all means have a go. You can do whichever you fancy. So I'm just like following these kind of lines here, which is much easier when you're trying to decide how big everything is. But I am keeping the flow going. I'm not just going to do a little line there because it does really help when you're actually drawing birds and things. So you're exercising your memory muscle and everything. If you try and use a continuous line where possible, it does help. Or you might want to put a few little bits like, where the end mark is, and then you can kind of continue that line round. Always lovely tail feathers coming over. But yes, we can do all sorts. If you want to work more loosely and just drop little bits of colour in while it's wet, that's really enjoyable too. So look at this beak. Everything's movable as well until we get kind of started. So just Look, so just enjoy getting those kind of the beaking and everything. If you're not, if you're kind of losing your way with it, just give yourself a little, point that in the right direction, like this. And continue down the chest. We'll see how wide that comes out, because one of the things is people often find, say, oh, it's too the tummy's too rounded, but actually it really is quite round on these birds. So if it helps, what you can do is just pop a little bit of where, the pattern, you may find the pattern to help you as well. That helps, bring it all the way down. But again, we could just kind of follow this round. It is very rounded, but I mean, if we were sitting up on the moors, I think we would be puffing everything out because it's cold up there, isn't it? I bet these birds do, apart from when they're in flight, when they're sitting, they do puff the feathers up an awful lot. Again, just kind of being mindful of where we're bringing this to. And I'm just popping in some of these feathers that are in here, look. So we've got the part of the wing here, which is coming down. Some of it's a little bit kind of blurred out, isn't it? But kind of comes backwards a little bit. We are looking a little bit at the angles of the wing and things like that, because that does help. And I find, because I'm going to go a little bit loose inside, but I'm going to try and keep the shape of the bird a little bit. So we've got the brown feathers, and then we have the other feathers there. And then we've got these lovely other feathers on the underside. There's so much to look at. There really is. It's super. We've got these other beautiful brown feathers here. So you can leave that or you can draw it in. It's entirely up to you. I'm just going to kind of get a few of those patterns in, just so it's helping me kind of work out. One of the things is making sure that we can have enough, we leave enough white in there so that we don't go over those patches. So that's one of the reasons I do draw in a little bit, is so that I remember to leave the white out, because it's not my best skill. So it is quite helpful to be able to draw a little bit in. And then we can get these lovely patterns in place as well. But again, you don't have to do any of this at all. You can literally just drop colours in as you go. This full feather here again. Just some of the feathers coming back on. Beautiful colours. And the only thing I probably will put on here as well is just a little bit of where this white patch is. But I'm just going to keep that nice, a little bit loose. It goes over the eye, doesn't it? I've not got the eye in yet, so I do with getting that in. It's very near, isn't it? It's got beautiful line. Okay. Lovely patch coming over the top. Again, this is just personal choice about leaving the white. You can pop on some masking fluid if you want to. Some people use that, but just I find that a bit too angular. Leave quite angular marks. So by all means, if you like using it, that's fine. So again, here I'm just making sure that I've got this white bit in place so that I don't go into it only where I need to with the shadows and things. And then some of the shape under here we'll get with some of the shading. So we're still going to look observing the shadows and what colour those feathers actually are, but the lightest bits at least we'll leave out then. And then we've got all of this. Well, I'm going to work into this a little bit. I'll probably bring a bit of pencil work into this. So again, it's just being familiar with, I might just pop almost like a little bit of a mark just to suggest around here whereabouts that's going to kind of come down to, so that will help. Oops, just realised here not finished off as the tail feathers. So pop that in. And again, with the angle of that, you can just bring that up. And then with the tail. So it just, if you tackle each bit on its own, it makes it much easier to see what's going on there. And then I think there's some kind of a stone, but you can't see any feet on this at all, hidden in the grass there. You might want to, if you want to pop in, you can go, as I said, as detailed or as not as you want, that you can almost kind of get a sense of some of those lighter areas where the back of the back tail feather, the back feathers are here. Okay, and then I'm just going to get rid of my line here before we start. You just got to be careful you don't take off too much of the watercolour paper surface. So just got to do that carefully and make sure it's all off. Otherwise, you might get some in your paper. When you're working on it. Just start thinking, actually, I think my tail feather needs to be a bit longer. Then I'm just going to bring it down, even though I think I've got a little bit of this paper cut off here. Okay. So yeah, there's some stone we can just see, can't we, just there, that it's sat on. So the only other thing to think about, before we go into kind of launch into this is, I think that's a bit wrong as well. That's what's going on here. Just come down a little bit more. I'm just going to bring that out. Um, Yeah, the only other thing I'm thinking about, because obviously with watercolour we have to make sure that we work light to dark in each area. So we can take the birds completely independently to the background and also some of this here. But what we were talking about earlier was, if we go over the top with something like a colour, then it needs to be a darker colour that overlaps over the top of a colour. If we go in with these very light greens, then it may not actually, unless you load up your brush with plenty on, it may not cover over the top. So I left that to people to decide today. Did they want to kind of go over with these light greens, also because they're lighter than some of the background as well? And quite a few people decided this morning that they would actually, um, they would actually pop some of their grass in. Maybe not the darker ones, so we can work in the darker ones before they did some of this background as well. Otherwise, the greens wouldn't show. So we just need to be thinking slightly differently to how we do normally if we're using acrylics. Sorry, yeah, if we were using acrylics, we would be able to layer up. So if you're using acrylics, that's fine to do that. So we're just thinking a bit more in detail about it. So I am going to pop in a few of these. Crosses are going to come over the top just to remind me where to put them, but you don't even need to do that, And then I'm going to work in some of this background behind it as well. So really, it's a fabulous opportunity to look at these gorgeous colours. I mean, they're so lovely. You've got the coolness, and you've got all these like kind of lovely warm colours. And even then, there's some greys and blues within there. So it's a beautiful, quite a muted palette, I'd say, which makes it nice. I think winter sometimes is a nice time to use a muted palette, especially in the landscape, because there's not as many colours, but we can then explore all the different kind of softer colours in the palette, which is really enjoyable because we don't tend to do that when we're painting the summer and spring ones. So, and certainly not autumn. So it's a great opportunity just to look at the cool, calm palette, which blues and hues and pastels really are very relaxing and calming. So the key, I think, really is to make sure when you try testing, I will be using this paper lot actually, is just to have a test. So I'm going to actually go in with some of these light bright greens today before I start the other. So I'm just going to move that over and have a little look. It's a quite big palette here. And I'm going to test, but I'm just going in. So I'm going in here because these are actually quite limey greens. So you may have a lot of choice in your palette, but you may not. And actually, I don't have this kind of lightness in there anyway. So I'm going to mix it up. So I'm going to use some sap green. And to warm or to brighten colours up, you can pop in some pops of yellow in there. You can go in with, there's the whole different range. You can tell I've been doing that this morning, can't you, on here actually? But we've got, the bright yellows or the warmer yellows. And I think really, if you just kind of explore that, which it is that gives you the colour that you want. You may have to add quite a bit, so I'll just be testing as I go along. That's quite vibrant actually, because I'm also going to thin it down a little bit as well. With more water, just so it's not quite as intense. Because obviously it's becoming more translucent there. I think I may actually just add a tad of warmer in there. These are getting really well, they're very well loved, these ones. Mm-hmm. When you get into the point where you're near, so this is very yellowy here. I'm going to use that, but I'm also going to bring in some next to it that are a bit darker. as well. So I've got a bit of a contrast between the two. So let's see. Because to see the blades of grass, I'm going to need a few different tones in there. So I've got one that's more, you know, it's more, I'd say it's more kind of, that's very foresty green, that one. It's a bit more vivid. Not just think that one. Sap green, isn't it? Yeah, that's fine. So we can basically explore greens using so many. So I'm just going to water that down. It's not so. I mean, you can put. This is what I said. You can heavily load your brush up with pigment. Using the tubes, that's another thing to think about. You know how much. Yeah, that's quite a darker green one. You know how much you put of the tube you actually put on your load up your brush, because they're the ones that sometimes you need to water really much more further down to get an effect that you want. So I'm just going to go with another darker green here. So I've got a few tones there that will work in harmony, but I'm going to put the dark ones on last. And just what I want to do is get these, make sure I've got these brighter, lighter ones in. Let's see if that's some more plastic paper. Move that out of the way. So no colours, but again, we're just exploring all of these. Now you can, if you're wanting to get those really fine, you can go in with a much finer brush. Just depends how you like to apply it. I'm just kind of sweeping upwards and then you get the little point at the end. Whereas if you press the brush down, it's going to splay out. So when I'm doing grasses, I tend to have a really light touch and just kind of flick the top, and then it just gets that nice point on it. I'm trying to get these tips on over the top of the Partridge. Choose my light touch, but you can use something called a rigger brush, which is really fine if you want to be wanting to do that. That's absolutely fine. And if not, then you can just experiment, explore using the brush you've got to see how fine a line you can actually get, you know. And again, you'll notice I'm not holding my brush right down here. If I do that, it's going to end up, I'm going to be really kind of restricted with my movement. I can only kind of move it here, whereas here I can kind of really flick it up. But again, it's just exploring the brush. I've got less pressure on that again at the top. So we can use one brush in so many ways. Quite enjoyable as well. And some people find it easy to come down. With grasses and things, I find it easy just to flick up, just so that I've got that lightness. But again, you know, if you're not doing it very often, it just takes a little bit of practice. You know, you can just sit with a bit of, you know, your paper like this and just kind of flip up, flip down, flip up. It's quite nice. These are the ones that kind of capture the light. Popping it in. Anything that's overlapping and then popping in now. I'm going to bring my grasses right down as well. So I'm not sure what this is, but I quite enjoy as an artist just I'm actually leaving things out sometimes I don't like them. So by all means, if you know, you can put your own little grasses moving backwards and forwards in here. That's absolutely fine. Now, if you want to do a little bit more on your grasses and you want to go darker in there, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to make sure, obviously, with this is quite dark, this blue. So by all means, you can, you know, if you want to do that, then do that. You know, I'm going to, so you can almost add your contrast of your grasses, getting a bit darker with them. Some people this morning did the grasses, like all of the grasses first and came back to it. So it's entirely up to you. The biggest thing with these grasses is, you know, is having that contrast of the lights and the darks and the different kinds of colours in there, so that it creates a little bit of depth to your grasses, makes them feel a little bit thicker. And also we can just look at the patterns that they make. You can do, you know, you could have put some masking fluid in where these grasses are, if you wanted to. That's another way of doing it. And then you can just go over over the feathers. But again, you know, everyone's working in such different ways nowadays where you can just choose which suits you. Sometimes you don't get as much softness if you put the fluid on, as you get quite, you know, the lines are quite, can be a bit rigid. I mean, it's fine, you know, but again, that's just it's a different way of doing it. Again, I'm just building these up here over the top. You can really go to town on some of these colours as well. And sometimes you get these thicker clumps together nearer the front that are in the shadow, and that's quite nice. So I'll go in much darker in that bit. And then some, I'm just going to make sure I've got some different colours in there that I want. If there's any really light ones, you can just leave that, you know, some of the areas a little bit light if you want to, and kind of work in between them. Some of the darker ones will go over anyway. That's why I said you can come back to that, because there's only some of the really light ones that crisscross over. You need to think about. But yeah, just concentrate on that front bit if you are doing it, and how much thicker it is here. Just so it doesn't feel, you know, too wispy, as it were. There's some darker colours underneath, so I'll probably come back to this bit when I've got some of those blues in there and just let's have a look. I'm going with a darker one again now, over here. If you're not sure, you can always test. If you haven't got any more greens and you've got one, then you can add some different tones in there. You could add some blues, or you could add a bit of a brown in there. That would be fine as well. So I'm kind of now, I've got slightly more pigment on there as well. But again, if you wanted to kind of, obviously if you thin it down, it's going to be less intense, but that's fine if you wanted to keep it quite washy. Oh, that's a very fine line down one or two of these strands, just so that we can see that they're there. You may even pop some yellow colours or whatever, you know, just see what you can see in there. There might be some kind of reddy brown ones. So I've got a little bit of burnt sienna on my brush I've just tapped on, which I'm going to use quite a bit before long anyway in the bird. So I might just pop just here, a couple in. So if obviously with watercolour, if we're leaving it to be wet and we're dropping colours in, it will kind of run a bit, but that's quite a nice, enjoyable thing about it. Just sometimes you're not sure where it's going to go or how it's going to behave, so you just gotta run with it if you're going to put it in very wet and just explore that a little, go with it. So I'm going to come back to that. I'm quite happy that up to here I've got where I want to before I go on to kind of getting this background on, but we'll just take a little pause for the moment there. So a little look at getting some of these lovely colours mixed up for this background now. So there are so many gorgeous colours, and this is the thing, what you may see in one, somebody else will see a completely different colour. So it's just working out, you know, what do you see? So I've got a little bit of a pan colour here, which is indigo blue, which I just fancy using. I really like it. And it's not a colour I use that often, to be fair, so I thought that's a good one to use. But you could use any kind of blues. You could even use as like a cerulean, a lighter blue. There's some quite light spots in there as well. Now I'm just going to use lifting out today to pull out any dark, like any that are a bit lighter, using my tissue, a little bit of a kitchen roll just to lift out a little bit. But you can always kind of just get a lighter one in there and then kind of let them blend. That's another way of doing it. So let me see. So this is obviously, I've got a little tiny squirt here of indigo and I need so little of it. It's so strong. Really strong colour. So I might have to actually water that down quite, yeah, there we go. That's kind of quite nice colour for the sky. It's quite difficult to see at the moment because it's wet, damp. So I've got some that's, I'll have to make sure I've got plenty. So that's the biggest, one of the other big things when we're doing backgrounds with watercolours, how have we got enough mixed up? Because if we stop and we forget what colour we've mixed in with something, then it can be quite difficult to do afterwards. And then it can dry as well while we're doing it. So I'm just going to start off with, I've got this kind of area here already. I'm going to go on with a big brush, but what I want to be doing is dropping some darker colours in whilst it's still damp. Now you can even add a little bit of, you know, water first to your background if you want to get it really damp. And then you can kind of drop colours in. And I know some people have some beautiful pinky colours in there this morning, actually. So if you wanted to do that, just kind of drop them in. Now, this obviously the thing is with that, it will get a little bit muddy with indigo blue and a bit of pink, but just go with it. Just go with it and just explore it, because if it goes muddy, then you know to like let it dry just slightly more. So if you are wanting to dampen it, I would just dampen it very slightly. I'll just demonstrate that because I don't often do that. Make sure that I'm just going in I'm not making mine really wet, really, really wet. Now I can actually go over this one a little bit now, but not too much. I don't want to kind of it to run over the top too much. But between that. I'm not going to go between down there, we'll do that separately. But we're just making it just ever so slightly damp. And again, as I said, we won't know till you do it whether it's too damp or not. That's something to definitely explore. But I am going to go in with this brush now. I'll pop in some of this pinkish colour. And this is where you can explore literally just dropping colours in. See if you like it. And again, it's how much do how much do you drop in? Well, again, just have a little play. Drop a little bit in the middle there as well. One of the nice things about watercolour is being able to, it's so fluid, you know, it moves so easily. And it's working out where the boundaries are, you know, where do you put it to stop it from kind of running in too much, you know, when do you do that? But each bit of paper is different as well. So you can go in, this one's quite a small piece, but when I was doing it this morning with A3, I have a big flat brush and I was just kind of bringing that in. But I'm going to go just down a little bit more and start to bring in some of these. And the difference is, because my background's a little bit wet, I'm just going to bring that in the edge, a little bit damp, it is starting to kind of run into the two together, which I'm quite liking at the moment. I can do a little bit more with that in the now. So I'm just using that colour that I've mixed up. It's nice and damp on that background, so it's moving really easily. I'm just making sure there's plenty on my brush. And this now, got my brush, using it on the side, and I'm kind of moving and pushing that water about with it rather than on the tip. I'm still holding it fairly well down so that I can get it on its side. But again, it's just find what's comfortable for you. So that's what it's all about. Lovely being able to move the water. It's a lovely experience moving it around. Bring that down between the two now. And then, you can look at what you've got so far. Do you want to move anything about a bit? Do you want to kind of push something else somewhere? And it kind of, it's quite nice. It's just looking at where I want to move that to. And then I'm going to start dropping in a little bit more of these darker colours as I'm coming down here between where we've already got that light colour in. So we can start to do that, which is nice. We know we don't need to worry too much because we've already got that colour in now as well. It stops us going, where might that be? I know, another way of doing it obviously is putting the masking fluid down first, and then you just paint straight over it. And that's fine, but you've just got to allow an extra 15-20 minutes drying time for that to dry, depending on how warm it is in your area. So that can delay your start a little bit. Make this much darker down here. So if you're wanting to kind of those two colours to blend a little bit, just add a bit more water near the top, and then you can, you can let that move around a little bit so that it doesn't feel like it's a very sudden change from light to dark. Just pop a little bit more water above. Just let it move about. Lovely though, isn't it? It's so enjoyable. It's just these darker ones down here as well. I'm going to drop that in now, down here as well. I'm really enjoying dropping in these slightly darker colours. And that's obviously will be very damp at the moment, but nice. And you can continue doing that until you're happy with the depth of colour that you've got, I always think do it gradually rather than drop the dark colour straight in, and then that you're happy with it. Otherwise, sometimes you can't go. You can go darker, but you can't really go lighter. If you do want to lift anything out, you can just go in with a tissue and lift it out. I was going to do that, but I decided to go in with this pinky colour, which I'm glad I stuck with now. And then as you're going through, if you want to darken any areas any further, then just drop in a bit more where you want those to go, because we're working lightest to darkest, so this makes sense here. Mhm. And that's the kind of experimental bit really going on there, which is really lovely fun, isn't it? It's really nice to get in with those gorgeous colours. Drop them in. There we go. So, you can come back in and start to work on the dark areas of your grass as well if you want to. That's what I'm going to do next. So I'm just looking at some of the darker colours. I might use a bit of brown, I think, and I'm also going to use some of that blue with it. It'll make it really quite dark, but I quite like the idea of that. So I'm going in darker now with this and some of these darker colours. Drop those in. So I'm seeing that kind of rock shape. But again, this is our interpretation of what we see, which is the lovely thing about it. It doesn't have to be really, really, really exact because we're not trying to create a photograph. We're trying to get our impression of what we can see with our colours, which is lovely. There's lots to explore with all the different colour combinations that you can use and everything as well, which is great. I mean, there's all sorts of browns and things that you might prefer to use down there. Now, if you're working and you think, oh, there's some light ones, and I've just totally omitted those, I'd like to get those in. And just whilst it's still wet, take a brush and you can just kind of go through, just lifting it out. You can take a damp brush actually if you want to. And you can just pull out, not to lift it a couple of times and pop it on the tissue, but you can sometimes just pull out a bit of that paint. Well, if it's small still, I'm just doing that just a little bit there just to show. You can scratch it out as well, but just want to let it dry a little bit so it's not so wet. Otherwise it'll just take off all your paper. So yeah, so I'm just kind of pulling out a few little bits there. Very good. So it's kind of just illustrate, we could just do a few little bits with it. Go. And then any other colours that you see that you want to pop in, like might be a bit dark brown or something, just test it first though. Because some of the brown's quite warm, you might not want a warm, but you might. I'm going with browny blue here. Or for ones you might want to drop in on some of the areas you've done. I've gone in quite a high contrast there, but you don't have to, because like some people like to make it much more light and washy. Again, it's just personal preference. If you're not sure, go in lighter. and then you know, it's not like such a shock if you don't like it. But it's how we kind of create a really good contrast in there. I've actually just popped a little bit of blue in there as well. But I'm going to do the rest when I come back once I've got the bird in place, actually. So, you know, when we're looking here, again, you know, there's no right way or wrong way of doing it. I'm kind of just going to look at, make sure that my background on the edge is dry, just so it doesn't bleed too much into it. So it's fine at the top. So I'm going to work head down. I'm going to get the eye in. And then you can use, you know, you can work in and get some of these colours in just around the light colours, and start to drop in. If you, again, if you want to let some of it be damp so colours bleed into each other, of course you can do that as well. So I'm just going to put this little red area, this pinky red area in. So it's finding the colour that you've got that you're happy with. Is it more red? Is it more pink? But kind of some of the rose colours are quite good, and you can always drop in a little bit of a bright Acadian red in there as well with it, just to make it a bit slightly more kind of a peachy colour, so it's not so dark. Again, just test it out to make sure that you've got the right consistency that you want. I'm just building it up really, just looking at the... So here again, I've gone back to my tip, choose my tip there. More control over it. And do a beak at the same time. Really lovely. It's such a nice topic because there's so much detail just to really look at. It's fantastic for our observation. It really is about looking and this, see what colours and things we can see and details. And you'll probably see on here as well, there are some different tones in here. You can drop some of those that's slightly darker, or make, you know, just make it slightly thinner if we want to get a lighter colour in there. That's what I'm doing now. Some final water in that. Yeah. And again, you can take a little bit out just with your brush, just to get where, you know, where you get any highlights or light shining on as well. If you want any colour to drop in, you can do that. So, you know, if this is a little bit of a slight kind of a grey tinge or whatever it is you can see there, I'm just going to drop that in whilst it's damp. And then it does, this is where you kind of, sometimes you want it deliberately to go into the others. So we're making a conscious effort for it to spread. Now, when that's dry, I'm going to go in and kind of pop in a brighter colour in there. But at the moment, I want it to just dry off a little bit before I do that. So I'll create the rest of that shape around there once it's dry. So you may end up with a shape you're not happy with for a short period, but that's fine. And then I'm looking at this eye. So again, it's important to capture that little bit of light in the eye, because, you know, the glass light where we get some reflection really really helps see that it's not flat, it's 3D. Whoops, this is running a bit too much. That happens, and you're not, you know, it's running in and you don't want it to, then just lift some of the colour off with a bit of tissue. Always pop it back in. This is where sometimes you're not wanting that to happen, it just does. So it's just a key really is to kind of let it dry. So I'm going to come back to the eye. At least I've got the outer shape. And then each area we're looking at, you know, how we can still put the dark one in even though we've not put this top one, because even the top's a separate bit. That's the beauty of doing birds in watercolours actually, because you can take so many small bits in isolation. So let's see. So I'm going to pop the darker colour in. I might go for a greyish colour, greyish blue. I may even put a bit of that when I've just used it. Let's just see how intense that is. So again, I'm just testing just to make sure I've not got it as dark or as not dark, you know, if you know what I mean, as I want. Then you pop it on. You always darken it off. And then I'm just looking at almost joining these two areas up. And it's how you kind of do it whilst keeping it a little bit feathery. So you can literally kind of make feathery strokes when you're doing it. I'm hoping this eye's going to dry enough at the top now to pop this through. But again, you know, I'm not going to kind of go in with a thick line. I'm just dabbing that because I want it to feel still feathery and not be too harsh. Thing is, once you've got a very soft background, if you sometimes go in too harsh, too angular on the bird, it can look a little bit out of place. So keep go to there with it. A bit dry now to put in the eye. It's almost like a seed shape, isn't it? Like a tomato seed or something. And then I'm going to try and just lift out a little bit. Lifted it all out. This is the exact thing with watercolour. You can lift it out at the right moment, and you don't always know when that is. We have to kind of like explore and try it a couple of times to get it so it works. I'm trying to take out just a tiny bit at the back. And then we've got these beautiful colours. So, you know, again, it's just really looking in detail here. I mean, of course, you can do some of these features with the pencil. I could actually go in and just do a little bit of demonstration with that sometimes. So I'll take, I've got to test these colours. That's one thing with pencil. So if I do this on this board here, I'm looking at how hard I'm pressed to press first before, because then, you know, we can end up with some quite intense colours if we're not careful. So it's like, if I want that to be not so bright, then I'm going to have to go in much more lightly and decide what kind of pressure I use for that. That's much lighter. If I want to go in more brightly, then I apply more pressure. So I am going to go in with a red. I'm just going to pop it along this beak here. Now it's dry. and then we'll run that to create a little bit of shape. But you can do that with a paintbrush. So I'm just going to wet that, and I've got to be a bit careful that I don't kind of, it's too damp underneath again. There we go. And you can pull that shape out a little bit as well if you want, bring some of the colour outwards. And you can do that with the feathering, so you can use a couple of different colours and layer them up as well, if you want to do that with the feathers on the top. I'm just going to go in with my brush because I'm really enjoying the painting it. So we've got like all these colours to decide, what colour is it? Greys, are they kind of, what colour are the warm colours? So I'd be thinking about using in my palette, I'm going to move this palette a bit nearer again, things like the warmth. I might use something like a bit of a burnt sienna, this kind of reddy brown colour just to start with. And then, I may, let's look, use that on its own. It's quite pretty, that. Or I could even get some of that and add, for example, some rose colour to it. And a bit more. And then thin that right down. Put more pigment in it. A bit more in there. And just that. So next to that one's got more pink in, so it's a bit more, it's a kind of a more pinky colour. So there's all sorts of things you can do to each colour to do it. And then obviously there's these lovely, really lovely kind of bluey colours. I'm not going to use my indigo though, I'm going to use a different blue. So I might test some ultramarine. It's just ultramarine blue. And for a pop of colour, or you could even go for like more of a cerulean, more of a turquoisey one, which is like that one. Just test them. I'm feeling it's a bit more grey. So again, it's deciding what do you drop in. Are you going to drop a bit of Payne's grey? You could use a bit of indigo in there. Or you could just use a little bit of grey. Let's see what happens. I'm just testing that one. You may even drop a bit of, say, purple or violet or something in. So I'm just going to bring all these colours over here. I had some on my brush already and it's got the purple, so that's quite nice as well. Just have a real, that's probably too warm, I should have gone with a different purple. So this is more violet than purple. Put some of that Payne's greys there. In there, and then thin that right down. So we've got quite a few different colours, in your palette that you can just kind of explore and have a play with, which is quite nice. The only thing is just making sure you don't let the cool ones with the violets and the blues run in too much to your warm ones. So just have a think about how, whether you want to get the warm ones in place first or not. And the other interesting bit is to look at where we've looked at before of the shadows underneath things. So under here, we've got some shadow, so it's not altogether white. So again, it's looking at that and thinking, what colour is that? Is it slightly warmer? So you can even drop in some, say, ochre colours. I'm just going to bring in some yellow ochre there. If I have in a bit of yellow ochre, sometimes I'll pop that down there, but I can actually sometimes drop that into another colour to warm it up. But it feels a little bit like that on some of these areas. So you can warm that colour up, or you can pop a little bit of a, I think I'm going to go in with a look. This shouldn't work. Sometimes it just does. It's a bit kind of grey-green, but that's what I'm seeing there. I'm just going to pop that in underneath. that helps when we get these shadows in place. It does actually help with the shape, creating the shape of the bird. You know, because we know that where the shadow of the bird will be going in. You know, so all these lovely things to think about. So I'm just going to leave you to just have a little play for a minute, and then I'll have a pause. No problem. These lovely things. Again, you can start to pop in work darkly to light if you want to. On here, I'm just going to go in really, really lightly. And this is where I suppose you could use your pencil if you wanted to, or you just drop in some. I'm actually going to use a little bit of white here to kind of make a pastel-y pinky colour. Tend not to really use white that much on its own with watercolour. More a case of just using it to kind of change the colour of some of them. So I'm bringing that up because it comes in between scenes too. And a little bit up here. And just going to bring in some lovely tones in here that we're seeing. Start to drop those in, just kind of lining up clean. Very much brighter. There's nothing stopping me going in bright as well. And get these kind of taupey colours, which are very like just a little bit of pinky grey. But also we could like that's too dark. Just makes sense. If you want to make it a bit kind of like kind of get a bit of a boaty colour in there as well. You can just go in the thin down bit of light ochre or a bit of white even in there. I just want to drop some in alongside it. You can kind of drop colours together just with a bit of care anyway. Just not over mixing them, we're just kind of letting them. Mm. Mm. You know, where they kind of, where you get them crossing over, you can just drop a bit of that colour in. You can always, you know, just lift it back out again if it's causing trouble. The main thing is just to make sure I'm not going over that green that we've just popped in, so I'm going to lift out any colour that's gone over the top of that. Just with a clean brush. And popping colours in. Dusty colours, aren't they? Just popping that very small amount of ochre, just makes it kind of a lovely dusty colour. Or you can pop some blue or even purple in, look. See what happens when you drop these in. We can go darker anyway, you know, under the wing and things as we go. Things are getting lighter towards the border area, just thin the paint right down as well. That really helps. Just lift out anything you don't want in there. Keep doing that. Drop these colours in really. Building them up. Any kind of like warm pops, and by all means go in with some brighter warm colours. We're just observing all the time what you can see really on here. Just making sure I'm not going to cross my greens that we've made. If you've got any light ones, I'm just going in with a bit of tissue there, just to pop that back in whilst it's still very damp. And the same on the back where there's a few little bits that are, also a bit lighter. I'm just going to pull those shapes with them. Pull those out, it's still really wet. We can go in, and put those deeper, darker colours on over the top that we need to. Lift these light bits out where there's a little bit in the ring. And take a pause there. See how everybody's getting on, because there's all sorts to think about. Okay, so just kind of layering this up, and then we'll get a little bit more in when we start to pop the darker colours in as well, which will really help us, see a little bit more definition. Sometimes I know with watercolours people get a bit, say, oh, I can't feel the bird. It doesn't feel kind of like that there's any edges to it. So it's just how we drop that in so that we've got some shadows in there as well. So it kind of like does create some of the definition, which is important to have a contrast even in watercolors. So I'm going to come back up. I might actually, let's have a little look. I think I'm going to continue down this bit whilst it's still damp, so that I can, if I want to, just kind of let some of it swish together. So I'm going to go into this bit. Just over the edge here, I am actually going to drop in some of these darker ones because it is on the edge of here, although it crosses over, that's fine. And so it just depends on whether you're wanting to go in with a dark brown in here, really dark brown, or you want to go in with kind of another colour. I'm going to go in with a dark brown, but what I will say is this will look quite harsh against the rest of it. So it's how much pigment you want on. That's something to try. So I think that's probably the right balance actually for me. Sometimes it can feel quite a strong contrast. So go in lighter rather than darker, and then you can decide if it's the right amount for you. So I'm just kind of going in and just creating just kind of, I'm not creating a really hard edge. But it's how we get how we get some of this definition in without almost tracing a line and making it really hard. We want to keep it soft if we can, in keeping with the painting. So I'm just going to kind of go in and then start to drop in bits around the edge here without making a harsh edge, because the feathers don't operate like that anyway, do they? Want to keep them nice and soft. And this is what I was saying, like I quite like the contrast of like a strongish contrast, but if you don't, you can always start this colour off, you know, much more lightly and build up. Here I'm going to just lift a bit out because it's tissue, because it's got quite, that is bleeding, and obviously still very wet on there. And actually I want this colour here to remain a bit more dusky and pink, so that brown's not helping. So I'm just going to just kind of try and pop that back in. And then I'll have to do these top feathers when that's dried a little bit more. So it's always a game, like a bit of a waiting game as well. You know, how much do we put on, how much do we roll up on our brush, etc. This bit here seems to be darker in there anyway, it's a little bit more solid. I'll put that in and that bit there. We've got these feathers coming down here, haven't we? So we have, like on the edge here of this wing, we do have some colour on the bird as well. And white in between it. And I'm not going to see the white unless I don't put that shadow in there. So that's sometimes why the shadows are really important. And creating that around the white of the around the white of the wing. Go back to here and start dropping some of these colours in again on the chest. And I'm going to come away and work on the next. So you can always do that. Work in one area, and then, you know, start to pop some of the other ones in. So I'm just looking at the colours underneath, some of these pinky ones on the edge almost of the wing, just before it transitions to a brownie colour there, which we can do over the top. Okay. This lovely dusky kind of colour that we've seen already. A little bit brown as well, so I'll add a little bit of brown into that. That's the underside of the bird, so it would naturally be a bit more shadowy there. And we'll darken that off as well, you know, as we go through. And I'm going to drop in some of these nice bluey tinges as well in there. But I may go and add a bit of brightness in it. So I may go in and just drop in into this purple, a bit of this cerulean blue, just so it pops a bit, because sometimes it doesn't harm to pop a bit of colour in. So over here, I'm going to try and leave a little bit of white around the edge. And that's the bit, isn't it? Just to remember, whilst keeping it natural. I'm just going to make sure I'm not going over the top of that. Well, I've got a bit of blue in here, and I've also got a bit of violet in there, just for a pop of colour. And a bit of cerulean blue. I'm just working I'm trying to leave a little bit of lighter area on that, over the lighter colour as well. Yeah, a little bit too on, a little bit on just a tiny bit. If you go over the top of there, then we'll have, you know, some of these other darker areas, but can't do that at the moment. So it's just, you know, saying it's fine, we'll just leave it. And I'm going to go back to the head, let that dry off, and then we'll come back and finish those bits once they're dry enough to. Because I just know if I start dropping these really dark colours, and it's all just going to go into one muddy mess. So I'm back up here now and starting to think about these lovely colours we've got in there, which seeing that there are, even amongst those patterns, just a few pops of this lovely colour that I've just put down there. That's what I'm seeing anyway, but we'll all be seeing different colours in there. That's absolutely fine. We can't do any more as artists other than paint what we see. And then it's thinking about, you know, these other last colour to go over the top, this darker one. So you go in with a small brush, or, you know, you can go in with your pencils and then soften those off with some water. And then very dark colour here. Just cast it down. Just make sure it's going to go, yeah. And again, it's just just wiggle my brush about a little bit. And drop in those little textures. Again, the only thing that's going to create that texture is just our own hand kind of mimicking what we see. I've gone further down my brush now though, and I'm using that tip quite a lot. So it doesn't feel harsh, I'm just wiggling my brush around a little bit. And again, all we can do is just follow some of these little strands down. And beautiful markings, Partridge. It's not really perfect, but it's just to get a, just kind of a similarity. So we know, and I guess in this. Recognizable. And again, we can start to like observe the lovely patterns that we get here, kind of wiggle around, don't they? Fabulous. It's like a, almost like a necklace, isn't it? And then going up in here as well. Okay. When we start to get these darker areas as well, it starts to feel, a little bit more like we're getting the shape, because obviously I know I've said this before about birds, but the directional movement really helps with creating the shape of the neck and everything. So it's helps as well. If we, pop out as being extra dark, then pop those in as well. And vice versa. If any are a bit lighter, then just kind of lighten them up with a bit of a bluey colour or something that's not quite as intense. And then we'll soften that down, just making sure that I'm right over there. Just take out anything you're not sure about. Always put, when it's, drying off, just a bit more of a softer colour on the back, so because I think actually it does come up and over all the other colour behind it. These pinky browns. And then, just looking all the way down the bird, what we're looking at, where is there any other dark patches we might have missed? And we just start to just pop those in, lighter to darker. That really helps kind of again with the shapes. I'm just going in with a slightly darker all over the top and just trying to kind of put the shape on there. Again, we're just creating those lovely, lovely shapes. Dark area there. Really want to help with creating some definition and a little bit more kind of texture and shape just by popping this extra brushwork in. And again, we can just continue to work around like that. If there's any more. You know, we're looking at the shadow, for example, underneath the wing. Those kinds of areas. It might be much darker in one area and then, you know, a little bit gets less dark. So we're just looking at those little changes. There's usually a shadow where the wing is. That's much darker in there. And then that's creating that depth for us. Like this colour was a bit more warm somewhere, so, or a bit of a brighter colour. That down, looking down here, up here, I may even brighten those colours off a bit. Might put a bit more burnt sienna in it, for example. So we're just really exploring those things as we work through. Yeah. But you know, we can just flit about really and until you've got, you know, where you are happy with each of the little bits. There'll be bits that come up that you want to work over the top that you couldn't do before because it was not dry or whatever. I'm going to make sure I don't forget to come back down here because that's the only thing sometimes you forget. Just bringing in pattern around that lighter area on the wing that we put in. Again, you know, checking if it is everywhere dark enough around the bits we've drawn for the shadows. Nothing there. These dark colours again around the front here, so I'm going to go in with this brown that's a bit warmer. Hopefully it was dry enough now, but we can only try it. Really? Okay. If it feels like like the rest of it's washy and you get these kind of stripy bits, then just add a little bit of water on the edge and just kind of soften it down a little bit. Should be still fairly, just bring a little bit of the other colour into it as well. So I'm just softly putting this in. So I'm like wiggling, it's just like sometimes we're learning little tricks with wiggling your brush so that even the bits that are a bit harsh, when we put them on, we're not getting that complete straight line, but we've got enough on. You know, to create that bit that we need to be darker. We'll just keep working our way through like that, really. Keep looking at what we can see. Some of it might need that darkening up even more, others might not. I've seen all these marvellous colours. You've got your representation. You know, and you've got some of these patterns that are help us to work out what's going on there. And really that you've got the balance that you want. So, you know, you've got enough shadow. So it's usually a balance, and you can look back and think, right, what's the darkest on there? And is there anywhere else on here that needs to be as dark? And that's a good place to start. If you're not sure that you've got everywhere, then just compare, just look around and think, yeah, that's dark, that's dark. There's a couple of bits on the chest, for example. The wing needs to be darker. You're just working through, it's like a process of working out where the balance is and making sure you're happy with that. You know, if you want to create a bit more shape, just look at that you've got the shadow following that round. You might need to make that a bit more of a solid line, for example. If it's so much loose that you can't kind of see, you can't work out where everything is. I'm just going to pop a bit more dark on here on this wing. So yeah, I mean, and then you can look as well as if, so when you're looking at the bird, you know, are there any areas of shadow on the back that you think, yeah, actually I'm going to pop a bit there, it gives me a bit more definition. So we don't want to flatten the bird by just kind of drawing a line around it, because that will, but there will be bits where like more of a shadow is cast on the back, for example. So you can just have a quick look and keep looking at that, even if you're not sure this time. As we go through, more of these things will become obvious. I've just noticed a bit of a really dark spot underneath the beak here. I'll pop that on, I haven't done that. And at the side there. So it's these little things that really help. Just to go back over and see, you know, what do we need to put on. And again, you might even just have a few little touches underneath the bird's neck, for example, where I think, oh, the chin, it's quite, you know, it's lighter, but there's more, you know, I can see, I want to pop some of the feathery shapes in there. It's a block, you know, it's those kinds of things. on the front of the chest, you know, is there a shadow cast there? There is actually down this side. So I'll pop that in, just break it up a bit, but put it in. So it feels, you know, that we're getting some shape in there. It might be a bunch of feathers. You think, oh, that's more of a block in there. I want to pop that in more of a block. So go ahead. Keeping it soft, nice, really nice, but also just looking at where those particular shadows, you know, are creating the shape of something too is what is really important too. I think sometimes that's when people lose interest sometimes with watercolours because they feel it has to all be washy, but it doesn't at all. And even so, some of you, like where I would be coming to now is I'm looking a little bit more in this foreground. I'm happy with where my bird is. But I might be looking at, you know, what's going on here. Is there some more dark, say, underneath, like what's going on with the shadow cast under here? Is it dark enough? Do I need to put something else in it? Oops, it's a bit too blue. I think it's quite a dark shadow under there that I've popped in. I want to bring it down a bit more in the foliage. These little bits, you know, we start to go back and we think, oh yeah, okay. Didn't see that the first time. And that's great, we'll just keep looking. You know, and also, you know, it may well be you've got some other colours now, some more greens that you're thinking about putting in, that you want to just define a little bit more. Or add because we started that by popping them down, but you know, you may want to run another colour along that, where the shadow of that is underneath the blade of grass or on the top of it, because often we have one side darker, and that again will pick up, oops, that colour, will pick up some of those things as well. So it's just, yeah, going back over and creating that. It might be you think, oh, there's not much, it's a bit thin on the ground here. Well, you know, this is where you can go in with your pigment. Start to weave a few more colours through. Make it a little bit thicker. As we just kind of did a little bit, didn't we? You can still keep the softness of these lighter colours here, but it might be that you're just going to enhance with a little bit of shadow side. Maybe make that a bit more defined. Maybe if it's seeing more colours in this grass now and you want to go in and colour up with a lot more pigment. Don't always know that when we start, but as we go through, we can make more decisions then about what we're going to do with our background as well. Because sometimes when you start out, you think, I don't know what my background's going to look like because I don't actually know what my bird's going to look like and whether I want to put more or less in. If you just start out like that, it does make that decision much easier further down the line. know, any other little with the brush as well, of course. That's the other thing you can do. Um, you maybe have some other colours you want to weave through. You might just be picking up a little bit more of a brighter one that you think, again, I'm going to put more pigment on the brush, get some more yellows or warm through. But it's just how you build up, and then it's important to think about where you want to stop. It's very easy to keep going and going and going, but I would just have a little pause. You can always add more, the next day. That's the other thing. So I'm going to take my own advice. I just stop for a moment and see. So I'll take a final pause there and see how you're getting on with that, because there's some beautiful colours, and you can just kind of just go through. It might be that, when you start to observe, you think, like, if I'm looking here, I'm thinking it's a little bit grayer on this side. So I might make this a little bit darker. But again, there's a lot to think about in it. So just have a little step back from it and see if there's anything that you want to do. So thank you so much for joining and coming and enjoying the painting, and I hope to see you again soon.